This program is designed to provide general information with regards to the subject matters covered. This information is given with the understanding that neither the hosts, guests, sponsors, or station are engaged in rendering any specific and personal, medical, financial, legal, counseling, professional service, or any advice. You should seek the services of competent professionals before applying or trying any suggested ideas.
Good morning, true seekers and true crime junkies. Welcome back to another episode of Hit the Road Jack, Finding the Zodiac. Today, we're going to take you back to last week's presentation and start off where we left off, which was discussing some of the odd statements that were made between the letters of the Zodiac and the Scorpion letters to John Walsh. Of course, we're also going to discuss some background in regards to Bush, since we're kind of at the cusp or at the end of the anthrax communications themselves. I would just like to share kind of some information, his upbringing, where he came from, what his father was involved with. So I'm going to be reading an article that was written by The Guardian, and it is kind of just a history and track record leading up to Bush's involvement. Good morning, Nolan.
Good morning, Annette. Good morning, world.
Welcome to the show. And good morning, Lindsay.
Good morning.
I know, bubblegum.
There we go.
I'm all on there. The bubblegum's blocking her mouth.
I know.
Good morning.
Well, welcome to the show. So I'm not sure if you guys had an opportunity to hear what it was that I just covered, but we're going to pick up where we left off on the letters between the Zodiac, Scorpion, and Anthrax last week. We're going to move into some history about the Bush family to see how all of this wraps itself up around war and applies. We're going to move into the Tom Voigt communications and the things I was able to save from his old AOL site, which will be interesting to note how things have changed since that time frame in 2000 to what is being said now. Which I
AOL,
think is great.
I used to love AOL.
I never had an opportunity to have an AOL account, and I think that if you kept them, it's because at the time they came out, they offered everybody a lifetime membership. So you paid a single fee and then you never had to pay again, which I'm sure they found was a bad marketing problem.
What century was that?
Well, then then the Messenger came out.
Yeah. It was a century. It definitely was, Nolan. But I actually received an email from a client yesterday who's on AOL. So there are people who are still actively, once they offer that.
Wow.
Yeah.
Oh,
emails are still active. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, yeah. Once you purchased it, a lifetime purchase. So AOL was the height of the introduction of the internet and the email system. And if you climbed on board and were able to afford their membership, which made them very rich at that moment, but very poor, I think, in the end.
Well, I think they tried to they did the Messenger for a while. If you remember AIM, it was called AIM.
I don't know.
AIM, it was called AIM. So if you didn't want to email your friend, then you would just say, well, here's my AIM name. And it was like kind of like Twitter, where you at in your name and whatever screen. Oh, we called it screen name. That was what it was. So we would be like, well, what's your AIM screen name? And we could chat, and you would just literally, it was like texting, but it was messaging
through the computer.
Yeah.
Yeah, gotcha.
And you could make group chats, and you could enter in group chat, like big group chats of like random people online, or you could add like pretty much just like text, literally. It was probably fun.
Trial. It sounds to me like, especially the way it worked out, it was probably a trial. AOL probably went on to buy something else and is still currently in the business of emails and internet and all of that stuff. But yeah, it is odd to see that AOL from time to time. Well, last week we left off talking about the odd statements such as routine robberies and sabotage homicide, which to me, when I look at these particular statements, especially like the few fake accidents, when he talks about committing his murders, few fake accidents is just word salad for sabotage homicide, right?
Yeah.
Same thing, yeah.
Same premise.
That wording is very off.
Very, very off. Well, very cryptic, should we say,
Yes.
right?
Yeah.
So when I was doing my research this last week, and I added another 60 slides to the presentation just based on what we're going to cover today and the Tom Voigt website stuff and those kind of things. So I usually only add maybe 5 to 9 new slides a week based on research, but wow, I really beefed up this presentation, and I'm going to try to get through a lot of it, but please stop me, you guys, if there's something you want to say or you want to add. Right now I've got up, this is literally just something that I had found when I was doing some research on the Scorpion letters, and just, ended with that. I wanted to kind of add this in. So it's making the fan is being responded to. You are welcome. That happens a lot with this case. A year or so from now, someone will post it and all of a sudden it will get a lot of attention. That's happened to me many times. And of course, that person takes all of the credit as if he or she discovered it, which I thought that statement was rather interesting because technically speaking, when somebody puts up, oh my gosh, look at this, this matches him too, they did just discover it in their mind, right?
Yeah.
Like we're dealing with new generations that don't have all the background and the history, and they don't know all the sites to go to find this information. But it also made some connections between other letters, which I wanted to share. And it says, one of those times when I put together the connection to the Swindles murder to the celebrity cipher card, which I have not looked at that. I've looked at the card, but I haven't really researched that card. So now this is going to send me back to see if this is consistent, what he has to say. He says the connection to the Swindle murders to the celebrity cipher card sent to I'm going to guess this is the Vallejo Times-Herald, September 25th of 1990. The picture on the front of that card was never shown to the public. I was told what that picture actually showed, which was San Diego, California, Ocean Beach. That was where the Swindles were murdered. The stamp on that card gave me another clue. The date, February 5th, which was the date they were shot. I felt Zodiac used certain stamps as clues, and I was right, at least on the stamp. It was a picture of Marianne Moore, who was a poet who died on February 5th. On a different year, but the day was exact to the day of the Swindles being killed. Now, wow. Swindles, if you're new to the presentation podcast and you don't know what the Swindles are, there's thoughts that a watch was taken from the Swindles murder and placed at the Sherry Joe Bates crime scene. And that was one connection that many people had made. So then we, of course...
Swindle is ex-military too, right?
Correct. And he was shot with a 22 long rifle gun. Yeah. He was taking a walk with his wife on the beach and they were shot and killed. There were also a box of Valentine's Day candies found on the wall next to their murder, which they suggested maybe the Swindles had, and the murderer had taken the box and set it up on the wall, or the murderer had brought the box. Either way, inside the box was the Valentine's Day stickers that we've talked about that then cross-connect to the Senator Vojinovich's communications, letters that he was mailed at a later time in 2000, which also matched the stickers that were sent in the Halloween card by the Zodiac. So there was this cross connection between the communications.
Well, I want to also mention that the dates, they like to mimic dates like that. It's like that's a pattern they use with numbers.
Well, of course. Yeah. Everything in there was a cross connection of some sort to another crime. So he never admittedly and openly stated he had been a killer for 60 years, but he would cross connect the crimes through the communications. He says, what's that?
And the physical clues, like the watch.
Correct. Yes. And many people aren't aware that there were physical clues left at each of the crime scenes, but I believe that there is evidence to support that there was. And that's why we think what we think about that watch that was covered in paint, because Mr. Swindle actually was a painter after he left the military. There were things about it that definitely kind of tied those clues in together.
You want me to tell you who else was a painter?
Who
worked Otis Toole? He worked for a painting company too, right before,
yeah, but I don't think he wouldn't have been old enough to be somebody who
No.
committed the crimes in Ocean Beach.
Came to my mind. Yeah.
It says and a painter was somebody who was a killer for the mob. I watched the movie
Yep.
The Irishman. That's what they
That's
called
what-
you.
that's
You
where I was
painted
going with
people's
that. Yep.
yeah, you painted the walls with people's blood by killing them, you know? So
Just like plumbers or operatives.
right.
Mhm.
Yeah, they all have nicknames, just
Wargate
like the
and-
pedophiles with the cheese pizza and the
Yeah.
they give them a different name so that then when they're communicating, people don't know what it is that they're talking about.
Yep. Mhm.
And he goes on, which I thought was interesting, and this is why I threw it in here. He says, I'm glad you posted the John Walsh Scorpion letter. Could Zodiac be born under the sign of Scorpio, or was he mocking the name Scorpio, which was used for the Zodiac's name in Dirty Harry? Anyway, I think that Scorpio letter sent to John Walsh was sent by the true Zodiac. Thanks again for sharing. And I'm pretty sure he found a logo of a scorpion and used that on his letter. He has some talent as an artist, but the detail in that scorpion was better than his type of art. And typically saying yes, but what if he just traced it? Right? Like the scorpion came out that good because he actually traced it from something.
Yeah.
I like this guy's takes, but the first paragraph seems that he has a little chip on his shoulder. But I agree with his takes.
I think they all do. I mean, honestly speaking, again, when I discovered whatever it was that I discovered, I then found out at a later date that other people had already put these pieces together. But that's not something I knew at the time when I said, oh my gosh, you guys look, and all the hype was, started up about something that I discovered. But the difference is that I'm discovering it based on a forensic point of view versus, oh, I just think it looks the same, because a lot of people don't know what to look for in handwriting.
And
Yep.
a lot of people don't even include the Swindle murders as a part of the whole overall Zodiac thing. But what we do, we consider potentially a Zodiac crime.
Absolutely.
I think Sherry Joe Bates is definitely. And I think
yeah.
the Swindles is too. And then there was another couple down in Southern California near Lompoc that were murdered too.
Right. We have
Right
a
around the
long
time of the
list.
Swindles murder, yeah.
And like I said, until the finale letter, until the Tim Miller letter, you don't get to see this author take credit for all the different crime sprees he is involved with. And he almost segregates himself out like he did in the Scorpion letter by saying, I've started a new crime spree in New Jersey and I have 23 victims, which I believe will pertain to the anthrax letters, unless somebody can show me that 23 victim list from the 1990s or whenever these letters were written to John Walsh. I think that a lot of times, just like the FBI has indicated to me, is that he was projecting what he was about to do. So he was, he was ahead of time saying what was coming. Yep. So
and
now I'm going to take
John's show. He was preparing him as well.
Oh, wait till you see the connections that I made between that stuff. That gets even more interesting. We're going to still be talking about John Walsh after we get through this history of the Bushes that have governed our country or been responsible. So like I said, anytime you guys just blurt in, I'm going to be busy reading. I won't see if you raise your hand, just say Nanette, because I'm going to try and make it through this as fast as possible, because I really want to climb into Tom Voigt.
Yes.
So basically, this is written by The Guardian, and it is a historical take on Prescott Bush all the way up through Bush. And I believe the ending of this is specifically designed to point at not just the anthrax, but the Twin Towers. And then, of course, the ending result, which was George Bush's ability to go to the war in Iraq. So let it rip.
And the Homeland Security Act.
Oh, of course, right? More ways to tighten down on us and cost us more money. Yep. Okay, so it says George Bush's grandfather, the late U.S. Senator Prescott Bush, was a director and shareholder of companies that profited from their involvement with the financial backers of Nazi Germany. The Guardian has obtained confirmation from newly discovered files in the U.S. National Archives that a firm of which Prescott Bush was a director was involved with the financial architects of Nazism. His business dealings, which continued until his company's assets were seized in 1942 under the Trading with the Enemy Act, has led more than 60 years later to a civil action for damages being brought in Germany against a Bush family by 2 former slave laborers at Auschwitz, and to a hum of pre-election controversy.
Well,
I want to stop
real
right
quick,
there.
Annette,
Yeah.
the IBM subsidiary, Hollerith, was German, and they're the ones that developed the punch card system, which the Nazis used to identify the Jews and the intellectuals and the progressives and the communists, so they could more easily eliminate them. So IBM was in league with the Nazis, basically, through their subsidiary Hollerith.
And
There's
I believe
a book called IBM and the Holocaust. I highly recommend it.
Well, and Terrence Batcher had actually mentioned at one point in time that the punch card system that was used in the Zodiac 13th card was that related to IBM as well. So, and I'm pretty sure he didn't read the book. Yeah. Maybe he did. Maybe I don't know. Maybe he is a reader outside of research, but he had made that connection many, many moons ago that IBM was somehow involved. So you are absolutely correct. And that's what I'm trying to let everybody know, that this seems to be wrapping itself around one particular group of people. And so we're going to see through this how how Jews were able to actually get out of Germany by paying their way here. They were the rich ones, of course, because you weren't making it over if you were low level or poor. No, you were being burnt in the oven. It was genocide, just like what we see in 100%. Palestine today. So we're going to see these connections. Okay, so the evidence has also prompted one of former U.S. Nazi war crimes prosecutor to argue that the late senator's actions should have been grounds for prosecuting for giving aid and comfort to the enemy. What I want to remind everybody is that how then do we still have future Bushes running our country after knowing this?
Exactly. And guess who is one of them?
Because
Donald Trump.
Because we're fascists, just like the Nazis.
We are? No, we don't know our history. We're ignorant.
We do not. Yep.
All right. So
they did a good job at hiding it and covering that up so nobody would know the history.
Well, again, the history doesn't come out until 30, 40 years later, and most people are just barely keeping up with the times, let alone trying to go back and figure out what was going on in our government. So when we say all these people are crooked, watch the connections happen. So the debate over Prescott Bush's behavior has been bubbling under the surface for some time. There has been a steady internet chatter about the Bush-Nazi connection, much of it inaccurate and unfair, but the new documents, many of which were only declassified last year, show that even after America had entered the war and when there was already significant information about the Nazis' plans and policies, he worked for and profited from the companies closely involved with the very German businesses that financed Hitler's rise to power. It has also been suggested that the money he made from these dealings helped to establish the Bush family fortune and set up his political dynasty. Again, how do you continue after doing something so nefarious and helping or assisting or profiting from and making money off of genocide? Do you become a dynasty? How? Remarkably, little of Bush's dealings with Germany has received public scrutiny. Now, if you guys noticed when I read in there that the documents were only declassified last year, that, and I believe that this was written during the time Bush was going, baby Bush, let's call him, was going to the Iraq War. That means that literally within between 2001 and the 9/11 events and 2003, when he went to war with Iraq, these documents were finally declassified, and they were from World War II back in 1945. Guys, like, come on, that's how long it took for the American citizens to get the information and that the files were released. Okay. Remarkably, little of Bush's dealings with Germany has received public scrutiny, partly because of the secret status of the documentation involving him. But now the multi-billion-dollar legal action for damages by 2 Holocaust survivors against the Bush family and the imminent publication of the 3 books on the subject are threatening to make Prescott Bush's business history an uncomfortable issue for his grandson, George W., as he seeks re-election. All right, so if he's reelected,
okay,
yeah, no, that's what I'm saying. This article was written, I believe. So was it Bush's first term when he went to the Iraq War, or was that his second term?
I'm pretty sure the start of the second, because he felt empowered by getting reelected.
So now you see where this article is falling in line as far as timeframes are concerned.
Yep.
It says, while there is no suggestion that Prescott Bush was a sympathetic to the Nazi cause, the documents reveal that the firm he worked for, Brown Brothers Harriman, acted as a U.S. base for the German industrialist Fritz Thyssen, who helped finance Hitler in the 1930s before falling out with him at the end of the decade. The Guardian has seen evidence that shows Bush was the director of the New York-based Union Banking Corporation that represented Thyssen's U.S. interests, and he continued to work for the bank after America entered the war. Tantalizing, it says. Bush was also on the board of at least one of the companies that performed part of multinational network of front companies to allow Thyssen to move assets around the world. Thyssen owned the largest steel and coal company in Germany and grew rich from Hitler's efforts to rearm between the 2 world wars. One of the pillars in Thyssen's international corporate web, UBC, worked exclusively for and was owned by a Thyssen-controlled bank in the Netherlands. More tantalizing are Bush's links to the Consolidated Silesian Steel Company, based in mineral-rich Silesia on the German-Polish border. During the war, the company made use of Nazi slave labor from the concentration camps, including Auschwitz. The ownership of CSSC changed hands several times in the 1930s, but documents from the U.S. National Archive declassified last year link Bush to CSSC, although it is not clear if he and UBC were still involved in the company when Thyssen's American assets were seized in 1942. Oh no, just like Trump bifurcating from Epstein, I'm sure he bifurcated himself from Thyssen as well. I don't even know if I'm saying that correctly. Thyssen's, whatever.
I think it's Thyssen. Yeah.
Okay. 3 sets of archives spell out Prescott Bush's involvement. All 3 are readily available thanks to the efficient U.S. archive system and helpful and dedicated staff at both the Library of Congress in Washington and the National Archives at the University of Maryland. The first set of files, the Harriman Papers in the Library of Congress, show that Prescott Bush was a director and shareholder of the number of companies involved with Thyssen. The second set of papers, which are in the National Archives, are contained in Vesting Order number 248, which records the seizure of the company assets. What these files show is that on October 20th, 1942, the alien property custodian seized the assets of the UBC, of which Prescott Bush was a director. Having gone through the books of the bank, further seizures were made against 2 affiliates, the Holland American Trading Corporation and the Seamless Steel Equipment Corporation. By November, the Silesian American company, another of Prescott Bush's ventures, had also been seized. How does he continue to make money? How do these people continue to rise?
Well, he was a senator, and so he had money in other ways too. And then he invested a lot of his profits in the oil industry in Texas.
Correct. Yeah, again, mob-like mentality, just like JFK's father being a bootlegger and bringing money to the table that then makes them a prominent political dynasty in the United States and capable of changing politics on a whim, or should I say on a threat. Yeah. A report issued by the Office of Alien Property Custodian in 1942 states of the companies that since 1939, these steel and mining properties have been in possession of and have been operated by the German government and have undoubtedly been of considerable assistance to that country's war effort. Prescott Bush, a 6'4" charmer with a rich singing voice, was the founder of the Bush political dynasty and was once considered a potential presidential candidate himself. How the F? So now we're back to the 34 felonies that Trump has been not convicted of by the judge because he knew he knew Trump was going to be running for president, and that he would be appealing these decisions. So he withheld his decision in order for Trump to run for president. This is disgusting. Let's see here. Prescott got there. Like his son, George, and grandson, George W., he went to Yale, where he was, again, like his descendants, a member of the secretive and influential Skull and Bones Student Society. We've talked about that in the past. He was an artillery captain in the First World War and married Dorothy Walker, the daughter of George Herbert Walker, in 1921. In 1924, his father-in-law, a well-known St. Louis investment banker, go figure.
He's already rich, yeah.
Yeah, helped set him up in business in New York with Averell Harriman, the wealthy son of railroad magnate E.H. Harriman in New York, who had gone into banking. Of course.
I thought I recognized that name, Harriman, from the previous slide. Yeah, Averell Harriman, I've heard about him quite a bit.
Well, and I just watched another mob documentary this last week, and it indicated that the places they had their hands in was transportation, ports, laundry, not laundry, linen companies, like, the garment industry, railroads, you name it, they had their hands in, the mob had their hands in all of this stuff. So the bank was set up by Harriman and Bush's father-in-law to provide a U.S. bank for Thyssen's, Germany's most powerful industrial family. August Thyssen, the founder of the dynasty, had been a major contributor to Germany's First World War effort, and in the 1920s, he and his sons Fritz and Heinrich established a network of overseas banks and companies so their assets and money could be whisked offshore if threatened again. By the time Fritz Thyssen inherited the business empire in 1926, Germany's economic recovery was faltering. After hearing Adolf Hitler speak, Thyssen became mesmerized by the young firebrand. He joined the Nazi Party in December 1931 and admits backing Hitler in his autobiography, I Paid Hitler, when the National Socialists were still a radical fringe party. He stepped in several times to bail out the struggling party. In 1928, Thyssen had bought the Barlow Palace on Breinerstrasse in Munich, which Hitler converted into the Brown House, the headquarters of the Nazi Party. The money came from another Thyssen overseas institution, the Bank voor Handel and Scheepvaart in Rotterdam. Sorry if I slaughtered that, guys.
So Harriman was, one point, he was the Secretary of Commerce for the United States.
Oh, so it's just
deep in politics, yeah. In business, of course. You're the Secretary of Commerce. You're a big businessman.
Well, and like we heard, or at least I heard on that social media post by a former Marine that was in Iraq, is that war isn't just a moneymaker on the front while it's going on, but whatever we blow up, we then pay to fix, and we give government contracts to people who either are not fulfilling them, not completing the job, overbidding or underbidding the job, and then coming back and asking for 3 times the amount, and we're still not seeing the repairs done.
Yeah.
So that's where the real money's made, is the cleanup. Yeah. And that's for all the rich people. Yeah, the rich industries. So
Harriman was also governor of New York at one time.
Oh, yeah, we're going to get into some of his little dirty business right now. It says by the late 1930s, Brown Brothers Harriman, which claimed to be the world's largest private investment bank, and UBC had bought and shipped millions of dollars of gold, fuel, steel, coal, and U.S. Treasury bonds to Germany, both feeding and financing Hitler's buildup to war. Between 1931 and 1933, UBC bought more than $8 million worth of gold, of which $3 million was shipped abroad. According to the documents seen by The Guardian, after UBC was set up, it transferred $2 million to BBH accounts, and between 1924 and 1940, the assets of UBC hovered around $3 million, dropping to $1 million only on a few occasions. In 1941, Thyssen fled Germany after falling out with Hitler, but he was captured in France and detained for the remainder of the war. There was nothing illegal. There was nothing, you guys. Nothing. Let me repeat that. There was nothing illegal in doing business with the Thyssens throughout the 1930s. And many of America's best-known business names invested heavily in the German economic recovery. Isn't that like saying that just because you were friends with Epstein, you weren't part of the child trafficking ring?
Well, I was going to say, they used Hitler. They made him out to be the bad guy whenever they're the ones that were really worse.
Do you think he really ate a bullet?
I don't think that he really did what they said he did. I think they were using him the whole time, like literally.
Well, of course, they're backing their own agenda, and that wasn't killing the Jews. That was bringing the rich ones over to the United States. And I'm not saying Jews as a bad thing. Again, not every single Jewish person who entered the United States is a bad person, but the people with the money that now control our information, what we see, the narrative of media, they literally will tell a news installation that they can't report on something if it makes them look bad. And I'm sure that there's a threat behind that either, something will happen. People are scared. It is mob-like mentality, period.
It is.
There's nothing illegal. Okay. Yeah. However, everything changed after Germany invaded Poland in 1939. Even then, it could be argued that BBH was within its rights continuing business relations with the Thesens until the end of 1941, as the U.S. was still technically neutral until the attack on Pearl Harbor. And again, we like to believe that attack was perpetrated and how it was Japan that perpetrated Pearl Harbor, correct?
Yes. And we didn't get involved against Germany. We're still neutral against Germany after Pearl Harbor. It was after that we finally got involved. When we could see that England and some of the other countries, that Germany was on a rampage, and so the United States finally got involved. It was probably like a year later after Pearl Harbor.
To get involved in war at this point after being
our involvement in fighting Japan.
What's that?
Our initial involvement was fighting Japan, not Germany.
Gotcha. Well, it says there was nothing. However, everything changed after. I lost my plane. The trouble started on July 30th, 1942, when the New York Herald Tribune ran an article entitled "Hitler's Angel Has $3 million in U.S. Bank." UBC's huge gold purchases had raised suspicions that the bank was, in fact, a secret nest egg hidden in New York for Thyssen and other Nazi bigwigs. The Alien Property Commission launched an investigation. And I'm pretty sure that if I owned a bank and somebody put $3 million in it, I would be aware of exactly who that person was. Don't tell me it plausible deniability that you don't know is the owner of the bank.
No,
don't
you
tell
have
me
to
that.
have written records.
Well, written records, hell, you're kissing that person's butt if they're putting $3 million into your bank.
Yeah, sure.
There's no dispute over the fact that the U.S. government seized a string of assets controlled by BBH, including UBC and SAC, in the autumn of 1942 under the Trading with the Enemy Act. What is in dispute is if Harriman, Walker, and Bush did more than own these companies on paper. Irwin May, a Treasury attaché and officer for the Department of Investigation in the APC, was assigned to look into UBC's business. The first fact to emerge was that Ronald Harriman, Prescott Bush, and the other directors didn't actually own their shares in UBC, but merely held them on behalf of Bank Voor Handel. Strangely, no one seemed to know who owned the Rotterdam-based bank, including UBC's president. Odd. May wrote in his report of August 16, 1941, Union Banking Corporation Incorporated, August 4, 1924, is wholly owned by the Bank Voor Handel and Scheepvaart NV of Rotterdam, the Netherlands. My investigation has produced no evidence as to the ownership of the Dutch bank. Mr. Cornelius Leevens, president of UBC, claims no knowledge as to the ownership of the Bank Voor Handel, but believes it is possible that Baron Heinrich Thyssen, brother of Fritz Thyssen, may own a substantial interest. May cleared the bank of holding a golden nest egg for the Nazi leaders, but went on to describe a network of companies spreading out from the UBC across Europe, America, and Canada. Here we go back to the Canada. So we had Canada in the middle of the bootlegging that JFK's father was part of. So Canada's got their hands right in the mix of whatever we got going on. And how money from Voor Handel traveled to those companies through UBC. By September, May had traced the origins of the non-American board members and found that Dutchman H.J. Kouwenhoven, who met with Harriman in 1924 to set up the UBC, had several other jobs. In addition to being the managing director of Voor Handel, he was also the director of the August Thyssen Bank in Berlin and a director of Fritz Thyssen's Union Steelworks, the holding company that controlled Thyssen's steel and coal mine empire in Germany. Within a few weeks, Homer Jones, the chief of the APC Investigation and Research Division, sent a memo to the executive committee of APC recommending the U.S. government vest UBC and its assets. Jones named the directors of the bank in the memo, including Prescott Bush's name, and wrote, "Said stock is held by the above-named individuals, however, solely as nominees for the Bank Voorhandel Rotterdam Holland, which is owned by one or more of the Thyssen family, nationals of Germany and Hungary. The 4,000 shares hereinbefore set out are therefore beneficially owned and help for the interests of enemy nationals and are vestable by the APC, according to the memo from the National Archives seen by The Guardian." Whew.
Can I add something real quick? You keep saying
Absolutely.
Rotterdam. I'm pretty sure that Hillary Clinton's maiden name is Rotterdam.
No, it's Rodham.
What is
Rodham. Rodham.
it?
Rodham.
Rodham? Okay,
Yeah.
I was just
Hillary
making sure.
Rodham
I was
Clinton.
like, why does that keep ringing a bell? Okay, all right.
Yeah. It says red-handed. Jones recommended that the assets be liquidated for the benefit of the government, but instead UBC was maintained intact and eventually returned to the American shareholders after the war. What? These are some people with some big pull. You got your money back after finding out that it was involved? Oh my gosh, with the enemy. Anyways, some claim that Bush sold his share in UBC after the war for $1.5 million, a huge amount of money at the time, but there is no documentary evidence to support this claim. Of course not. That was mattress money, people. No further action was ever taken, nor was this investigation continued, despite the fact that UBC was caught red-handed operating an American shell company for the Thyssen family 8 months after America had entered the war, and that this was the bank that had partly financed Hitler's rise to power. The most tantalizing part of the story remains shrouded in mystery: the connection, if any, between Prescott Bush, Thyssen Consolidated Silesian Steel Company, and Auschwitz.
Wow.
Thyssen's partner in United Steelworks, which Harriet has come up with United Steelworks in some of her solves. So sometimes when I see some of these names floating around, I'm just like mind blown. United Steelworks, which had coal mines and steel plants across the region, was Friedrich Flick, another steel magnate who also owned part of IG Farben, the powerful German chemical company. Flick's plants in Poland made heavy use of slave labor from the concentration camps in Poland. According to a New York Times article published on March 18, 1934, Flick owned 2/3 of CSSC, the steel company, while American interests held the rest. The U.S. National Archive documents show that BBH's involvement, that's Harriman, involvement with CSSC was more than simply holding the shares in the mid-1930s. Bush's friend and fellow bonesman, Knight Woolley, another partner at BBH, wrote to Averell Harriman in January 1933, warning of problems with the CSSC after the Poles started their drive to nationalize the plant. The Consolidated Silesian Steel Company situation has become increasingly complicated, and I have accordingly brought in Sullivan and Cromwell in order to be sure that our interests are protected, wrote Knight. After studying the situation, Foster Dulles,
Yep, that's Alan.
but
Dulles,
Alan,
who was the Secretary of State of the United States.
Alan Dulles, right? Well, Alan Dulles was the CIA.
Dulles. That's his brother.
Oh,
Alan
okay. I
Dulles
knew
was
there had to be a
Yep.
I knew there had to be a connection.
Yeah, they're brothers.
So Foster Dulles is insisting that their man in Berlin get into the picture and obtain the information which the directors here should have. You will recall that Foster is a director, and he is particularly anxious to be certain that there is no liability attaching to the American directors. Of course. Let's hurry up
So
and
at
shut
the
it
time,
down.
he wasn't Secretary of State yet. He was still a businessman. But I think when Truman took over, he appointed Dulles to be Secretary of State.
Gotcha. It says, but the ownership of CSSC between 1939, when the Germans invaded Poland, and 1942, when the U.S. government vested UBC and SAC, is not clear. SAC held coal mines and definitely owned CSSC between 1934 and 1935, but when SAC was vested, there was no trace of CSSC. All concrete evidence of its ownership disappears after 1935, and there are only a few traces in 1938 and 1939, says Eva Schweitzer, a journalist and author whose book, America and the Holocaust, is published next month. So this must have come out sometime in the 2000s. Silesia let's see where we're at. I want to make sure. Silesia was quickly made part of the German Reich after the invasion, but while Polish factories were seized by the Nazis, those belonging to the still neutral Americans had some other nationals were treated more carefully, as Hitler was still hoping to persuade the U.S. to at least sit out the war as a neutral country. Schweitzer says American interests were dealt with on a case-by-case basis. The Nazis bought some out, but not others. The two Holocaust survivors suing the U.S. government and the Bush family for a total of $40 billion in compensation claim both materially benefited from Auschwitz slave labor during the Second World War. Kurt Julius Goldstein, 87, and Peter Gingold, 85, began a class action in America in 2001, but the case was thrown out by Judge Rosemary Collier on the grounds that the government cannot be held liable under the principle of state sovereignty. What the F?
Yeah.
This is like
what year? What month in 2001?
I don't know.
Okay,
but
that'll be curious.
Funny that it's wrapping. Now you're getting where I'm saying things are
I
wrapping
know.
around this. Yes.
Mhm.
And this to me reminds me of the vaccination court, where basically if a vaccine hurts, harms, or kills your child, you can only sue for up to $250,000. They've literally put a cap on being able to sue for punitive damages against these medical or pharmaceutical companies, which is absolutely just protecting them and is completely disgusting. Jan Lisman, one of the lawyers for the survivors, said President Bush withdrew President Bill Clinton's signature from the treaty that founded on the court, not only to protect Americans, but also to protect himself and family. And we still made the man president. Lisman argues, Clinton, right?
No, but
Lisman,
Bush, yeah.
No, but I'm saying he's saying Bill Clinton's signature from this treaty had been removed not only to protect Americans, but also to protect himself and his family, he says. No, it was to protect his ability.
Himself and his family.
No, President Clinton protected himself.
No, it's Bush. If you read the sentence,
President Bush withdrew President. Oh, I see what you're saying. President Bush withdrew President Clinton's signature from the treaty that he founded the court, not only to protect Americans, but also to protect himself and his family.
Reference to Bush,
okay. Lisman argues that genocide, but I'm sure that still protected Clinton either way, right?
How do you withdraw someone's signature from a treaty? That's weird.
Exactly.
I know.
What legal
grounds?
What legal
to do?
Yeah, what legal
authority?
Grounds?
Yeah. He
because
signed
presidents can do.
He was president.
Presidents can pardon people. I'm waiting for the end of Trump's term to see that he pardons Ghislaine Maxwell. So we'll see where it goes.
Oh, I've been waiting for that one.
Yeah, Lisman argues that genocide-related cases are covered by international law, which does hold governments accountable for their actions. He claims the ruling was invalid as no hearing took place. Even scarier, they were able to keep it quiet, hush it, and wipe it from the books. In their claims,
and they still do that now.
Yeah. In their claims, Mr. Goldstein and Mr. Gingold, honorary chairman of the League of Anti-Fascists, suggest the Americans were aware of what was happening at Auschwitz and should have bombed the camp. The lawyers also filed a motion in The Hague asking for an opinion on whether state sovereignty is a valid reason for refusing to hear their case. A ruling is expected within a month. The petition to The Hague,
international law. That's not American law, though.
But that's what they're trying to claim is that they don't have any jurisdiction in America for this particular act. The petition to The Hague states from April 1944 on, the American Air Force could have destroyed the camp with air raids, as well as the railway bridges and railway lines from Hungary to Auschwitz. The murder of about 400,000 Hungarian Holocaust victims could have been prevented. The case is built around a January 22nd, 1944 executive order signed by President Franklin Roosevelt calling on the government to take all measures to rescue the European Jews. The lawyers claim the order was ignored because of pressure brought by a group of big American companies, including BBH, where Prescott Bush was a director, because that ends their gravy train, right?
Yeah.
If Roosevelt was able to achieve this, that would have put these guys out of the money-making business. Lisman said, if we have a positive ruling from the court, it will cause President Bush huge problems and make him personally liable to pay compensation. The U.S. government and the Bush family deny all the claims against them, of course. In addition to Eva Schweitzer's book, 2 other books are about to be published that raise the subject of Prescott Bush's business and history. The author of the second book, to be published next year, John Loftus, is a former U.S. attorney who prosecuted Nazi war criminals in the 70s. Now living in St. Petersburg, Florida, and earning his living as a security commentator for the Fox News, oh, good Lord, and ABC Radio, Loftus is working on a novel which uses some of the material he has uncovered on Bush. Loftus stressed that what Prescott Bush was involved in was just what many other American and British businessmen were doing at the time. Doesn't make it all right. Just because other people are doing. I remember my father saying, oh, just because so-and-so does it, you think you can? They're still wrong. You can't do it just because other people can. You can't blame Bush for what his grandfather did any more than you can blame Jack Kennedy for what his father did. I loved that statement. Hold on. They were all freaking criminals making money that now sets up a political dynasty that runs our country for 80, 100 years.
More than that.
Yeah. Grandfather bought Nazi stocks, but what is important is the cover-up, how it could have gone so unsuccessfully for half a century, and does that have implications for us today, he said. This was the mechanism by which Hitler was funded to come to power. This was the mechanism by which the Third Reich's defense industry was rearmed. This was the mechanism by which Nazi profits were repatriated back to the American owners. This was the mechanism by which investigations into the financial laundering of the Third Reich were blunted, said Loftus, who is
now
vice chairman.
How they funded Hitler.
Well, that's what this whole article is about.
Yeah, that's what I'm just saying. Like now I've only got picture up.
I've only got a couple minutes here. I want to finish this out. Wait,
okay,
no,
go ahead.
We're not finishing it out. Never mind. Go ahead.
I was just gonna say it kind of like it's a full there's your full circle of how they set him up and how they made him to be the bad guy. So you're looking over here and we're all hating this guy. We're not looking over at what's right in front of you and what the Bushes were doing and what they were building.
Exactly.
They did a good job at it.
And others that were supposedly the enemies of Hitler were profiting from business with Hitler in the Third Reich.
Exactly.
Yep.
They're claiming to be an enemy.
Full circle. Yep.
Hands deep diving into that money grab.
Mm-hmm.
Let's see. This was the mechanism by which Hitler was funded to come to power. Oh, okay, got that.
I think the next
the Union Banking Corporation was a holding company for the Nazis for Fritz Thyssen, said Loftus. At various times, the Bush family has tried to spin it, saying that they were owned by a Dutch bank, and it wasn't until the Nazis took over Holland that they realized that now the Nazis controlled the apparent company, and that is why the Bush supporters claim when the war was over, they got their money back. Both the American Treasury investigations and the intelligence investigations in Europe completely belie that. It's absolute horseshit. That person wrote this in their article. Horseshit.
Oh wow! I would have.
They always knew who the ultimate beneficiaries were. There is no one left alive who could be prosecuted, but they did get away with it, said Loftus. As a former federal prosecutor, I would make a case for Prescott Bush, his father-in-law, George Walker, and Avril Harriman to be prosecuted for giving aid and comfort to the enemy. Wow. They remained on the boards of these companies, knowing that they were of financial benefit to the nation of Germany. Wow. Loftus said Prescott 100%. Bush must have been aware of what was happening in Germany at this time. My take on him was that he was not terribly unsuccessful in law who did what Herbert Walker told him to. Walker and Harriman were the two evil geniuses. They didn't care about the Nazis any more than they cared about their investments with the Bolsheviks. I don't know who the Bolsheviks are.
Russians.
Oh, so they
Soviets.
Reportedly
Yeah.
Didn't care about their...
I'm going to air quote. Doesn't matter who the enemy is. Doesn't matter who the friend is. They're all about making money.
100%. They are no different than when I idealize now these type of things that they've done is to me no different than Israel, who cares for nothing and nobody but themselves and the money that they make. So we're seeing that type of mentality within our own political establishment. The Anti-Defense League, we're going to hear about that in the middle of this talk about the Bushes as well. Guess who the ADL backs? President
Israel.
Bush.
Okay.
Bush,
Yeah.
yep.
Yeah.
President Bush,
But also,
just like Albert Pike.
it's the same people, the
It's a
government
full
contractors that make money off military aid to Israel. 'Cause
100%.
they're building the planes and the bombs and whatnot.
Mhm.
And whenever we give the weapons or the money that goes for weapons to Israel, these people are profiting.
Yep.
Yes. Well, I wasn't able to actually finish this entire article. It looks like I still had 3 more slides of information to deliver that just kind of buries the bushes just a little bit further. But
I was
really
gonna
kind
say,
of,
look, it seemed like you only got halfway through because there was a lot more. That's why I was like, I don't think you're at the end.
I'm not at the end yet. No, we've
Well,
got
we
a
can
lot
do
more to
next week.
share.
Yep.
And it will show the involvement both with Jews, with Israel, with the ADL, with politics. So maybe the real truth here is that those that are just like the oh gosh, I want to remember the name they called themselves. They're the elite that are better, bigger, the new world order, if you will, while they're trying to demise all of us to continue making money off of us and enslaving us in this
If
particular
you guys
country.
remember when
Illuminati.
We're over, you guys. I'm sorry.
Illuminati is the word you're looking for.
We're over our time. We'll pick this up next week and where we left off, and then we'll be climbing into the Tom Voigt information. Thank you both for being here and your comments today. We will see you guys next Friday. Have a great
Have a
weekend.
Have a good weekend.
Peace.
Yep.